Hey everybody, Joseph Rothschild here, aka Mono Bluetron, back with what I am lovingly referring to as the penultimate episode of the first, and this next part is in air quotes, season of 10-minute testing. Now, after Monday's episode and the ensuing stream where we played basically exclusively Uranus Monarch, I realized I was having just a little bit too much fun playing Yu-Gi-Oh! And I needed to get back to my roots of making sure that both myself and my opponent hated the game so much after our match that we were going to sell all of our cards and buy into Force of Will. So here's the deck I've developed to make sure that that can happen every single game. Here's a deck that if you recognize, I feel genuinely sorry for you. This is Wattlock, a simpler deck from a simpler time full of simpler pleasures and, less dark holes off of the ban list. It attempts to utilize the effects of Watthopper, an incredibly busted 1-star thunder monster that says your opponent cannot select another Watt monster on the field as an attack target or a target for a card effect. Effectively, it's just a really busted version of Marauding Captain. Establishing the Wattlock basically prevents your opponent from playing the game at all unless they have a sweeper like Regeki and Darkhole. And while those cards are legal, we can do our best to mitigate their threat. So we're playing 3 copies of Watthopper in order to establish the lock, 3 copies of Watt Giraffe. You actually do need a way to win the game after you lock them out of it. Watt Giraffe is a perfect example. It can attack directly, has 1200 attack, and it's searchable off of our next monster, Watt Cobra. This card is a 1000 attack monster that can attack directly and adds a Watt monster from your deck to your hand when you hit them. It's probably the best card in the deck. Next, we're playing 1 copy of Watt Beta. Its effect doesn't really matter. It discards a card out of your opponent's hand if it gets to attack, but it can't attack directly. More importantly, it's a 2-star tuner, which will be a little bit more important later. 3 copies of Watt Dragonfly. When it's destroyed by battle or a card effect, you get to special summon a Watt. Effectively, you can just chain them over and over again until your opponent's out of attacks, and then you play one of your Watthoppers and summon another one from hand. We have 3 Thunder Seahorse. This is just like Thunder Dragon, only way better. You get to discard it and add 2 of the same named Thunder monster with 1600 or less attack from your deck to your hand, which is your entire deck. You can use it to get 2 copies of Watthopper, or if you've already got the Wattlock established, some beaters. We have 2 Honest, because sometimes we have to beat over problem monsters. 1 for 1 lets us special summon our Watthopper. 3 Mimic Clay. This is a very interesting card that I had never considered until reading up on the archetype. You get to target a face-up defense position monster on your board and special summon a monster with the same name from your deck. Since Watthopper is routinely in face-up defense position because you can special summon him off Watt Dragonfly in defense, this card is actually pretty good. 1 copy of Regeki because it's good, 3 copies of Where Art Thou to get us additional copies of Watthopper, and then 2 copies of Photon Lead so we can get those out of our hand and onto the board. 1 copy of Soul Charge. If your opponent gets through the Wattlock, you can just re-establish it if you don't die on their attack. 2 copies of Recycling Batteries. This allows us to recycle batteries and also get copies of Watt Cobra back in our hand after we tune them away. We have 2 copies of Twin Twister because it's good, 3 copies of Messenger of Peace because Gravity Bind is terrible and everything in our deck gets under Messenger of Peace anyway. This card's been way better than I expected. I didn't really think Gravity Bind effects were good in 2016, and certainly they're not, but they're better than terrible. Then my new favorite card, 3 copies of Starlight Road. I thought about playing The Huge Revolution is Over, but figured, Stardust is probably a little more funny, and because our opponent would then have to land a couple of sweeping effects, because then we can use Stardust's effect exactly 1 time, I thought this was probably the better option. Then we have 1 copy of Solemn Warning because it's good. In the extra, we got the 3 Stardust, which enable the 3 Starlight Roads, and 3 Watt Chimera. This card is Yata Garatsu. That's ridiculous. If it inflicts damage to your opponent's life points, they put a card from their hand on top of their deck, and it can attack directly. You can make it off of a Watt Cobra plus a Watt Beta, so we do that almost every game in order to prevent our opponent from drawing the answer that they need in order to beat our Wattlock. So with that in mind, let's jump into the games and see what happens. So as always, we'll work our way up. We're going to start with this opponent who is playing Elemental Heroes in the year 2016. Of course, what can I say? I'm playing Watts. He is also playing cards like Branch and Hero Signal, kind of slow, not very powerful effects, so we'll see how this turns out. We get to go first, so we're going to set up this Messenger of Peace and the Watt Cobra. This is a bit of a brick. This is what a brick looks like, and unfortunately, we're just going to have to ride it out. He emergency calls, and I go, oh, he's going to get Masked Hero Shadow Mist, but nope. He gets Burstinatrix. And at this point, I'm a little concerned, because Burstinatrix can actually get under Messenger of Peace, and so can Avian, so I'm going to go ahead and chain these Watt Dragonflies together and then end with a Watthopper in defense mode. Thankfully, I've still finagled a way to get the entire Wattlock out by Mimiclaying, and then I'm going to start beating in with the Watt Cobra. We're going to get Watt Beta under the assumption that the next turn we can make Watt Chimera. Then I recognize, you know, we want to end this probably a little faster. Let's get in one additional attack with this Watt Cobra in order to add a Giraffe to our hand so that we can, like, make Chimera and then pass back and then summon Giraffe and do 26 a turn instead of 14. So he's got 2 branches. He's making a polymerization play right now. I'm going to Twin Twister these 2 branches in order to prevent him from getting card advantage. I don't really know what else I could possibly be doing here. Nothing seems particularly good. So I have the option here of beating over the Woodsman, and since he gets a polymerization every standby phase, I figure I actually probably do have to do that. Then he flips Hero Signal, and I go, oh no, I should have just slowed my roll. Thankfully, he's only getting a Wild Heart, which doesn't do anything to us. And at this point in the game, it's basically over. We get to attack, put the card on top of his deck, attack, pass it back. He can't do anything. He can't draw an out because we know the card he's drawing. This is just the absurdity of this incredibly frustrating deck. We're going to get in here for lethal, and that's the end of the game. So next up, we're playing against a deck that I think is actually really cool. It's like Crystron full Metal Foes. It's got 50 cards. I guess I understand why he's doing that, but it still frustrates me. He's going to go ahead and draw Rescue Rabbit out of his 50 cards, and then go to town with the Metal Foes guys. Going to Metal Foes fuse out the Full Metal Alchemist. So here's the problem. This guy is Thousand Eyes Restrict at instant speed, and if he catches on to what I'm doing, then I'm totally bonered. I'm gonna go for it anyway, 1-for-1 this Watthopper. He lets the Where Art Thou resolve, and I go, oh god, it worked! I have it! I made the lock! Another game we definitely shouldn't have won, but we got to confuse him with what we were doing long enough that he played himself. So he's just going nuts with Crystrons right now, but thankfully he can't really do anything. I'm going to Twin Twist away this counter, I don't know, just because I'm an idiot. We don't have a way to attack until we draw Cobra off the top, which represents like 1,000,000 points of damage and 1,000,000 cards in our hand, but he synchros into the Crystron that Wabaku's, and so we're not going to be able to walk Cobra this turn. We'll just get to do it next turn. Unfortunately, being a turn behind is a little bit of a problem for us. Like, look how nuts this deck is. He's just doing whatever he wants. In a world where he could interact with us, think how good this would be. We're going to go ahead and battle phase it up, add a Watt Giraffe to our hand, and then we're going to set this Watt Dragonfly. He can attack it because it's set and he doesn't know it's a Watt, but obviously he shouldn't attack it because it is a Watt and it will be destroyed and get me another Watt, but, you know. That's the idea. From his perspective, it makes sense to attack it. At this point, he's just like going through the motions and basically drawing every card in his deck. I think in a desperate attempt to thin it as much as possible to get a Regeki going. I get Watt Beta and then tune into Watt Chimera with the Giraffe so that I can keep drawing cards off of Watt Cobra. Unfortunately, he has set his entire hand, so we're not going to be able to Yatagarasu him, but that's fine. He draws... What is this card? Crystron Entry, yeah. He kept playing these like tribal Crystron spells and the Crystron Synchros, and every time I'm like, alright, is this Black Rose Dragon? No? Sounds good. Let's keep playing. And at this point, he's in chat saying, I can't believe I don't have an out to this. This seems like something I should be able to out pretty easily. And I'm like, yeah, well, you gotta draw Regeki. I don't know what to tell you. We don't play the Watt Giraffe here because of 2 reasons. Firstly, it doesn't change lethal, right? It only puts him to 1,000. And secondly, I need a spot active so that I can feel good about playing Starlight Road. He's going to go ahead and send a bunch of spells, which is not a big deal, to be honest. This turn of his takes about 10 minutes in real time. Like, look at this. Jeez. I am not excited for this deck to be any kind of meta. Whew, boy, oh boy. Yeah, go ahead, dude. Thank God this stuff targets. That's all I have to say. So after all that shenaniganing, we actually do have lethal. We're going to get in and win the game right here. But not before we get a couple more instant speed effects off. And there it is. So our third game is up against a guy who's playing 60 cards. I saw this and went, oh, thank goodness. Another easy deck for Watt to beat. That's not exactly true. He's playing Lightsworn Infernoid, which is not particularly good for me. He's going to lead with, it's called Frozen Void on YGO Pro. It's Void Vanishment, yeah. I don't Twin Twister it because I'm like, no, I'm going to wait for the Imagination, and then I'm going to get that and the Vanishment. I'm so smart. Then he Monster Gates because he was able to send a card off of Vanishment, and I'm like, okay, well. But then he banishes the Twin Twister, and I'm like, okay, well, that's actually pretty good for me. Now I can establish the Wattlock. So we're going to normal summon our Watts and hope that this is enough to win the game. We also have a Watt Cobra in hand, a Thunder Seahorse. Like, we're kind of living. So he's going to summon as much as possible, but he really has no play around this. We have a bunch of Thunder Seahorses in our hand that we'll start firing off in order to, I guess, thin our deck. It's not like we particularly need anything. We're going to turn our guys to defense mode after attacking, just to give them a chance in case this was Mirror Force. But here is the most ridiculous shit in the universe. He's playing Left Arm Offering. I understand why. It's like, it's a cool little bit of tech in this deck. But he left Arm Offerings for Raigeki, the only out, and then plays it. And then he beats me up for 1 billion damage, and I'm thinking, okay, I do technically have outs, but under Red Eye's Black Metal, I don't really, and then the replay ends. So we're back with the deck. Boy, it's nice to know that this is just as infuriating in the year 2016 as it was in 2012. It did what it had to pretty well. As always, its weakness has and will continue to be board sweepers, and there sure are a lot of those that are coming off the ban list more every day. Thankfully, I think cards like Starlight Road might be able to make a comeback because there's a lot of, like, Twin Twisters around that just randomly get you a free Stardust Dragon. All in all, there's not much to say about it. I think the deck is good when it's good, but its potency almost completely relies on your opponent's ability to find the one out that they're all playing in their deck and the potential 2 outs out of the board. So if you're comfortable assuming that your opponent is not going to draw Raigeki, play this deck. But if not, which is probably the correct perspective, maybe steer clear of it. So that's that. I hope you enjoyed watching this in 2016 and not 2011 or 12, where every single person who talked about Wattlock had to use the picture of that woman saying Watt as the title card to their video, and you had to, like, smile and pretend that memes were funny. I hope you enjoyed the fact that I deliberately skirted around the issue that Kaiju are actually an out to this strategy, and everyone's playing those nowadays. And most of all, I hope you just enjoyed the video. If you did, make sure to give me a like, a comment, or a subscribe. It really helps me out. And if you want to see me play the decks that we make here on the show on stream, I stream on Twitch every Tuesday and Thursday from 9:30 a.m. to noon Eastern Standard Time. Finally, if you want to see a certain deck or strategy played on a future episode of this show, let me know in the comments below, and I will do my best to accommodate you. Otherwise, I will see you on Friday.